The moment my parents looked me dead in the eye at our weekly Sunday dinner, the one dinner I always made sure to attend, driving an hour each way, and my father declared, not with anger, but with a flat, cold indifference that cut deeper than any shout, "Nobody needs you, Alex," my entire world shifted. My mother, usually the quiet mediator, simply nodded in agreement, spooning gravy onto her plate as if she were endorsing the weather report. That sentence, just 4 simple words, delivered amidst the clatter of cutlery and the forced cheer of a family meal, was the final, devastating confirmation of what I had suspected my entire life. It wasn't a punishment, it was a statement of fact in their eyes. But I didn't break down, I didn't yell, I didn't even cry. I just smiled, a slow, genuine smile that must have looked utterly terrifying to them, and in that instant, I made a silent vow. A vow to do the one thing they never thought I was capable of, the one thing they never saw coming. Tell me, if your own parents told you that you were completely superfluous to their lives, would you have reacted the same way? Would you have found the strength to walk away and build a life so far beyond their petty world? To understand that moment, you have to understand the dynamic of my family, a dynamic built not on love, but on utility. I am Alex, the middle child, the perpetual runner-up. My older brother, Marc, was the golden boy. He was a natural athlete, charismatic, and followed my father into the family construction business right out of college. He was the future, the heir apparent, the son who ensured the family legacy continued. Everything Marc did was met with praise, funding, and approval. My younger sister, Clara, was the delicate flower. She struggled with chronic, though often exaggerated, health issues and played the role of the needy, sweet baby of the family. She required constant attention, care, and emotional support, which my parents gladly provided, often dropping everything to cater to her latest crisis. And then there was me. I wasn't an athlete like Marc, and I wasn't conventionally needy or delicate like Clara. I was just capable. I was good at school, I was responsible, I got a scholarship to a good university, and I built a solid career in software engineering, far away from the family business and its demanding spotlight. And that, paradoxically, was my curse. Because I was capable, my parents never had to worry about me. I never required their emotional or financial support. And in the twisted currency of my family, if you don't need help, you don't need love. If you aren't creating a problem for them to solve, you aren't necessary. I was the family's invisible support system, the one they took for granted. I was the go-to for fixing their endless technology problems, from setting up a new router to recovering deleted files on their phones. I was the emergency driver whenever Marc got too drunk at a corporate event or Clara needed a last-minute ride to an obscure doctor's appointment. I was the financial cushion they never had to acknowledge. I always covered the cost of my share of family vacations, bought the most expensive gifts, and always made sure I contributed more than my siblings to holiday expenses, just to avoid any possible criticism. I did it because, deep down, I clung to the hope that if I made myself useful, if I made their lives easier, they would finally see me, truly see me, and acknowledge my value. Every time I fixed something, every time I drove them somewhere, every time I paid for something, I was hoping to earn a crumb of the affection they showered so easily on Marc and Clara. But the gratitude was always brief, transactional, and quickly forgotten. Oh, Alex fixed the Wi-Fi. Good. Now, about Marc's promotion. Or, Alex drove me. Thanks. Where is Clara? She sounds upset. The subtle cruelties piled up over the years. My college graduation was overshadowed by Marc's engagement announcement, which my mother insisted on discussing throughout the entire celebratory dinner. When I bought my first apartment, a significant milestone for me, my father's only comment was, "It's small, isn't it? Marc will need something twice this size when he starts a family." My accomplishments were always minimized or used as a benchmark for my siblings to surpass. Clara, on the other hand, constantly needed financial help due to her inability to hold down a job, and my parents would proudly discuss how they were supporting her, highlighting their sacrifices, as if those sacrifices made them better parents, better people. The more capable and successful I became on my own, the more irrelevant I felt to them. I was the non-essential component, the spare wheel that didn't need their attention. The specific evening that led to the defining moment was typical. It was a Sunday dinner at their house. Marc and his wife were there, talking loudly about a new boat Marc was looking at. Clara was there, recounting in dramatic detail a minor flare-up of her condition, drawing all of my mother's sympathy. I, having just successfully secured a major, complex project at work, the kind of project that could make my career, tried to share the news. I waited for a break in the conversation, cleared my throat, and said, I have some great news, actually. I just signed the contract for the Aries project. It's huge, it'll be a massive career step. There was a brief silence, perhaps 2 seconds, and then Clara sighed loudly, Oh, Alex, that's nice, but did you hear what the doctor said about my stress levels? It's not just nice, it's serious. My mother immediately turned to Clara, her eyes full of concern. My father, however, didn't turn away from me immediately. He looked at me, gave a dismissive wave of his hand, and said, Well, Alex, you always figure things out. You don't need us to celebrate your work, do you? You handle your own things. Then he turned to Marc, asking about the boat engine specifications. It was that casual dismissal, that complete lack of interest in my genuine joy and achievement, that finally broke my carefully constructed wall of tolerance. I sat there, staring at the perfectly roasted chicken, realizing I had just driven for an hour and spent half a day preparing a complex work presentation only to hear my triumph minimized to a non-event. It was a pattern, a lifelong script they kept repeating. And it was then, when I was quietly fuming, that my father made the final, unforgivable statement. Marc had just mentioned needing a significant loan from my father for the boat, and my father readily agreed. My mother then sighed contentedly, looking around the table at Marc, Clara, and their respective spouses. Her gaze fell on me last, and she said, almost wistfully, It's so wonderful to feel needed, to be able to help our children, isn't it, honey? And that's when my father delivered the fatal blow, meant as a compliment to himself and an insult to me. He patted my mother's hand and said, Yes, it is. We are so important to them. Frankly, Alex, and he paused, looking directly into my eyes, those cold, gray eyes that always judged. Nobody needs you. You are perfectly self-sufficient. And that's fine, but it certainly doesn't require much of our attention. The silence that followed was agonizing. Clara looked slightly embarrassed. Marc just kept eating, oblivious. My mother simply nodded, confirming the statement. Nobody needs you. It was the truth, distilled and delivered with brutal honesty. They didn't need my money, my time, or my capabilities because I was competent enough to handle my own life. I was not part of their narrative of parental sacrifice or family interdependence. And it was in that crushing silence that I smiled. Not a strained, painful smile, but one of pure, shocking clarity. I realized they had given me the ultimate gift, freedom. The freedom from the futile need to please them. So that's the situation I was in. I was the emotionally unneeded child, explicitly told that my self-sufficiency made me disposable to the family unit. I was sitting at a dinner table where my family was literally confirming that I was an unnecessary presence. I had spent my entire adult life trying to prove my worth to people who fundamentally valued neediness over strength. Before I tell you what I did next, the decision I made right there at that dinner table and the subsequent actions I took, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have lashed out? Would you have cried? Or would you have, like me, chosen the path of radical, silent self-respect and finally done what they never expected? I continued to smile. I put my fork down slowly, carefully wiping my mouth with the linen napkin. I looked at my father, then my mother, then Marc and Clara, meeting all of their eyes, letting the silence hang heavy. My calm demeanor was the opposite of what they expected. They expected shame, anger, or tears. You're absolutely right, Dad, I said, my voice quiet, clear, and steady. I don't need anyone. And the beautiful thing about that is that it means no one has any claim on my time, my resources, or my attention. My father frowned, sensing the shift in the air. What's that supposed to mean, Alex? He asked, a hint of genuine concern creeping in, The first time I'd heard it all evening. It means, I continued, standing up slowly and deliberately, that I am withdrawing all non-essential support, effective immediately. And since, as you've both just confirmed, I am not needed here, there's no reason for me to stay. I folded the napkin precisely and placed it next to my plate. I hope the Wi-Fi holds up. And Marc, I hope you figure out how to repair the leak in the sunroom ceiling I was planning to look at next weekend. Clara, you might want to call a professional for that obscure app you wanted developed for your small business idea. They stared at me, dumbfounded. My mother finally stammered, Alex, don't be ridiculous. It was just a phrase. No, Mom, I interrupted gently, but firmly. It was the truth, and I accept it. You and Dad need Marc's legacy and Clara's dependency. You don't need me. And now that I know that, I'm going to do something I should have done years ago. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes. One was addressed to my parents, and one was a thicker package for Marc. To my parents, I said, placing the first envelope next to my mother's plate. This is a registered letter from my attorney. It officially notifies you that I have removed myself as an emergency contact for all family members, cancelled the retainer I paid to keep the family financial accounts audited, and, most importantly, I have formally withdrawn my name from any personal guarantee for the business line of credit you both co-signed for Marc 2 years ago. I'm sure Marc remembers asking me to do that as a favor. That guarantee is now solely yours, Dad. The color drained from my father's face. He knew the sheer size of that guarantee. It represented a huge portion of his personal net worth if the business faltered. My support had been his quiet security blanket. Then I tossed the thicker package onto Marc's lap. And Marc, this is the complete, printed source code and architectural breakdown. For the custom inventory management software I spent 3 months of my personal time building for the family business when you were struggling last year. The one you told Dad was too complicated to use, but which secretly stabilized your whole supply chain during the crisis. Well, the licensing agreement, which you never signed, is now terminated. You have a week to transition to another system before I remotely shut down my servers and terminate all my personal cloud services currently running your backup data. Have fun finding a replacement. Marc spluttered, his mouth gaping open. The inventory system wasn't just helpful, it was the entire infrastructure holding his struggling portion of the business together. You can't do this, my father finally shouted, his voice shaking with sudden fear, no longer indifference. I can, Dad, I replied, my smile unwavering. Because, as you yourself pointed out, nobody needs me. And a person who isn't needed cannot be relied upon. I put my hands in my pockets, looked around the stunned table one last time, and delivered my final line, the one they would never forget. I've been covering for all of you, financially, technically, and emotionally, for years. Now, you all get to learn what happens when the invisible pillar is removed. You get to learn what it means to actually need someone who isn't there. With that, I turned on my heel and walked out of the house. I drove the hour home, not in sadness, but in exhilarating silence. It was the first time I felt truly free. The aftermath was immediate and chaotic. I immediately blocked their numbers and all social media profiles. The first wave was frantic calls and texts, directed not at apologizing, but at fixing the sudden, catastrophic problems I had created. My father's attorney called me the next day, practically begging me to reinstate the line of credit guarantee, explaining the financial vulnerability he had suddenly exposed himself to. Marc's business was in crisis within 48 hours, their entire inventory system ground to a halt without my custom software and cloud service, leading to massive logistical failures and loss of crucial contracts. He was forced to explain to my father the real scope of his dependency on my unneeded tech help, something he had previously downplayed to make himself look more competent. Clara, whose crises relied heavily on my quick responses and problem-solving, suddenly found herself without her immediate, reliable chauffeur and tech support, forcing her to actually rely on her own limited resources, or my already overwhelmed parents. My parents were faced with a dual disaster. The existential fear of financial ruin thanks to the exposed line of credit guarantee, and the logistical nightmare of dealing with the fallout from Marc's failing business and Clara's daily demands, all without my competent, silent intervention. They finally understood what it meant to rely on their two needy children without the stable, invisible force field I had provided. They tried every avenue to contact me, emails, letters, even showing up at my apartment, but I was gone. I had already taken a pre-planned, month-long sabbatical from work, flying to a remote island, turning off my phone, and truly disconnecting. I was doing what they never did, prioritizing my own peace and happiness. I used that month not for revenge, but for healing, for celebrating my freedom. When I finally returned, rested and renewed, the storm had passed into a dull, painful ache for them. My father had to scramble to restructure the business loan, putting a severe strain on his retirement savings. Marc's business took a massive hit, forcing him to let go of the boat and face the brutal reality of his own lack of business acumen without my technical foundation. He had to hire an expensive consulting firm to build a system half as good as the one I had given him for free. Clara was forced to manage her own life and finances, leading to significantly fewer crises when there was no immediate, dedicated help available. The biggest consequence was the silence. They eventually stopped trying to reach me, realizing that their transactional relationship was over. I had finally done what they never thought I was capable of, putting myself first and walking away permanently. The final meeting I had with them was 6 months later, an arranged, neutral meeting at a coffee shop mediated by the family lawyer just to finalize some ancient, minor financial paperwork. My parents looked older, tired. My father simply nodded, but my mother spoke. "Alex," she said, her voice small and brittle, "we were wrong. We realize now what you did for us." I just smiled, the same terrifying smile from that dinner. "Yes, Mom," I said, "you do. And now you know the cost of making someone feel unneeded." I didn't return to the fold. I didn't offer to help. I continued to live my life, wildly successful and completely free of their emotional baggage. I became the person I was always meant to be, the one who genuinely needs nobody, and whose value is determined only by myself. They finally got the self-sufficient son they claimed I was, only he didn't stick around to be their safety net. So, here is the lesson, the ultimate moral of this story: if people treat you like a convenience, or if they minimize your worth because you don't fit their required narrative of need,